Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the final part of today's Day 9 Daily, part number 3, where we learn to be a better gamer. It's the 497th Daily. Holy shit, I do a lot of these. I want to come back to this cool moment that we're seeing in this game between Sheth and Orc. So, envision for a moment that we are in our standard situation in a Zerg vs. Terran in Wings of Liberty. Because right now, our friend Urk is doing a Wings of Liberty style play, which, I'll be honest, I imagine that Marine Tank Medevac will remain great. I don't see any reason for it to be bad in Heart of the Swarm. It's not like, oh, Viper, oh god, you've never been able to get to my tanks till now, right? It's going to be strong. There's going to be... actually, the most important thing is that... Sorry, I'm reading the chat. They just said funny things. They're still trying to convince me that there's a spider in my room. There's a spider in your hair. You wouldn't be able to see a spider in this hair. The spider would get lost and spend 3 hours trying to get out, and Disney would make a movie out of it. Whether things are good or bad, the fact remains that people will probably do it. Marine Tank Medevac, people will probably do it and win a lot of games with it and that sort of thing. So we have to account for it. But at the very least, I want you to envision for a moment, we're in Wings of Liberty. We don't have the benefit of all our cool swarm hosts or anything like that. What would happen now? Well, the Zerg player would probably have a lot of infestors. The Terran would be trying to send small groups of Marines forward to break the area. He'd be staying spread out. But very, very rapidly, let me do this so that way it changes to the right color. Very rapidly in Wings of Liberty, the Terran would end up knocking down the front door. There's no delay technique that you can use as Zerg other than having already built the right units to defend. StarCraft 2 has a lot of that feel. I don't already have the right units. I'm going to lose this game and I'll have to get the right ones next game. There's not that many save things. But the Swarm host will function that way, which is why it's quite cool. In part 2, we talked a lot about getting up to the Swarm host and how our position was set up. So now as we come back here and Chef's units turn back to a vivid green, we've got to be a little careful with our Swarm hosty buddies. But suddenly we have these streams of things that can delay, and if you actually leave your infestors behind for fungal growth, fungal plus locust is an unbreakable defense for small numbers of Marines. Emphasis on the phrase, for small numbers of Marines. We fortunately got some nice chipping damage as Liquid Chef, but again, it's this cool delay tactic. So Chef has units here where he's defending with. Again, we're seeing the problem with Swarm hosts. Swarm hosts have the more exaggerated problem that infestors do. They suck at dealing with drops, but we can see that Chef kind of has enough frickin' money to have built the drop defense. So that's kind of the solution there. So step 1 in this game, where we're seeing the benefits of Swarm hosts in the late game, Chef literally got some lucky step forwards with the Locust, killed off some tanks, and just went, hey, I can go kill that. Nice. Alright, we have another set of tanks. How is Liquid Chef going to deal with it? Again, Swarm hosts suck at dealing with drops. We lose one Swarm host. You have to have a lot of Swarm hosts to be able to deflect them properly. Chef is expanding like a freaking lunatic. But suddenly, I want you to think of these Swarm hosts as tanks and the tank line. In Terran vs. Terran dailies, we do this thing where we'll draw a line across the map. Like, for instance, this patch of roaches right here. I'm going to step away. I'm going to go over to this uninteresting piece of terrain. Come to the mini-map with me, and I want you to envision these roaches as being tanks. We would do things where we would say, okay, so if we have tanks there, we draw a line across the map, and where are the safe expansions? Well, they're the ones behind the tanks, so these ones would be safe. If we had tanks here, this expansion would not actually be safe because the tanks would have a line here and we wouldn't be able to deflect, for instance, movement. Oh, actually, incidentally, this does. I didn't realize what part of the train I was on this map. But this expansion would be less safe if these tanks were, say, a little farther south, because we just look at the line that they draw across. Same thing works with the swarm host, because of the fact that they burrow. They fix themselves into the ground. So as they burrow here, this expansion is not safe, because we can run up past here with our Marines. The Locust will chase us, but we can kill this off. But this serves as a pretty nice deterrent for him to have this army, which is all located here. It's a pretty nice deterrent for him trying to move his way down to kill off this expansion. And suddenly these roaches that were literally only good as a mid-game defense suddenly work to our favor. So I'm going to stop for a moment and come back to this transition once we see this in full-fledged usage. Look at these units trying to come up and deal with our swarm hosts. Annihilation. We have a pretty rock-solid defense. We transfer drones here because, again, we draw not the tank line this time, but the swarm host line. And because of this, we're able to do these sorts of counterattacks that end up being very, very effective. And in the meantime, we've been able to get up to a hive and get up to our Ultralisk tech, which is always the hard part. Killing off this expansion, taking him down, took down the expansion, burrowed. Continuing to deal with this push, but for the most part what we've done is we've stalemated. So I want to talk about that transition series of steps, because it's kind of tricky, but once it all's fleshed out, it's really elegant. And that is a word that you use when you freaking majored in math. Things are not sexy or awesome or amazing. They're elegant or slick. Slick is a very common phrase used by math folk. It's like, this is a really slick proof. This is a slick little way to prove that isomorphism. So, we started off and we built small numbers of Ling Roach to deal with the variety of mech and unupgraded Marine Marauder that could be thrown at us. Hellions dealt with by our slow roaches. Speedlings deal with the slow Marines, the Marauders. All this helps deal with stim Marines. We're good in the early game. We then transition up to layer and get speed roaches. Okay, this allows us to re-secure map control against the Hellions as we get the Infestor tech up. Now we have Ling, Roach, Infestor. This is a defensive mixture designed to thwart early pressure. If he is going for crazy powering, triple expand mass upgrade, we just build more drones and get fewer units. If he's going crazy aggro, try to kill us, we build more units and less drones. Still Ling, Roach, Infestor. The cool and then we get these swarm hosts up, and suddenly we have two things at our disposal. One is what we saw at, let me see if I can actually rewind to it. Yeah. One is what we saw at the 18-minute mark in this game, which is where we had our swarm hosts combining with our Roach Ling army to break an attack. That's one option that we have. But we have a second option that's quite complicated, which is to group our slow units together, our swarm host Infestor together, and use our fast units, our Roaches and Lings, for the purposes of counterattack. That's the cool transition moment that I liked quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this game up a little bit. Kind of has a hilarious ending, but this is the moment that I most liked. We actually get the chance to see 10 Infestors, or excuse me, 10 Swarm Hosts produced. I don't like this play to add the extra Swarm Host because they sort of just do the same thing as these Swarm Hosts do. They just defend for us. If you want to be pushing with the Swarm Host, what is this, Burrow Charge? Yeah. For all the good old attack prowess that these guys have, they're still kind of flimsy in an attack. Because even though we're being awesome here, we are neglecting all our bases back home that are now defenseless. And let me remove all these color coding stuffs. If this happens, we're suddenly in pretty bad shape. Killing all our stuff off. So Liquid Chef kind of awkwardly bounces back into this Ling Ultralisk play. I will note that back when I was saying, I don't like those extra 10 Swarm Hosts, if Sheth had, for instance, built another 5 to 6 Infestors, and then gone Ling Ultra Infestor, would have been great. We would have done the exact same endpoint of Ling Infestor, or Ling Infestor Ultralisk, the exact same endpoint that we'd have in Wings of Liberty, but we would have had extra expansions up thanks to our Swarm Host, and we could counterattack more, knowing that we could safely deal with whatever was thrown at us thanks to these Swarm Hosts. And we could continue to reposition our Swarm Host to take more expansions with our Ling Ultra Infestor play. Hell, we could even go Nidus Network and Nidus the front of his base and use the Swarm Host there, and then still pull them back for defense. I understand TLO's been doing a good bit of that, but I haven't gotten the opportunity to see it. This game ends in a really close, sweet-ass kind of way. All this craziness going on. Remember all those Swarm Hosts that died? Well, they're dead now. So that means that we can't defend our frickin' main. But per usual, they're good for the defense. So here they go. Come on, burrow. Come on, burrow. I'm sure they'll burrow at some point. While all this counterattacking is going on, remember the structure I was referencing earlier? The Swarm Host for the defense and the Ling Ultra Infestor for the offense and the counterattack? Here it is, a little too late, but in full action. As our Ling Ultra is killing stuff off, finding expansions, not giving up, because of course all men stick in never give up, never surrender mode. When you have 11 tanks, no reason to stop building them. We have ourselves our nice defense upgrade again. Again, I think that players will start to not overbuild them. We kind of have a freaking lot of these Swarm Hosts that aren't really doing as much. I think that 8 Swarm Hosts will do about the job that 15 Swarm Hosts will do for controlling space, for instance. Very narrowly one game. I really have to speed it up so that way we can take questions. I want to take your questions. Though this game is pretty cool. Yeah. Don't forget that Blinding Cloud works on planetary fortresses. A single Viper could have killed this. Single Viper plus plenty of units, I guess. And finally, we get to see the final touch of the good old Locust. We can use them in combination with Ling Ultra. Oh, poor Infestor got pushed along. We can use the Locust to absorb the tank fire to get our Ultra Ling right up to the front lines. And once again, it's hard to defend expansions with the Swarm Host. But I will note that we can still do the same exercise where we draw a line of what the Locusts are protecting. And we see 2 expansions behind, this top right and this top mid. And you'll notice that this expansion at the bottom is on the wrong side of the line, and it even feels vulnerable just looking. Terran could easily just sweep down and kill it off. And there wouldn't be much we could do about it. These top ones, Terran would really have a hard time holding off. Ends the GG occurs. Cool. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to be taking questions. Now, given the fact that the game is in beta, I'm sure that the Swarm Host will behave differently later on. Maybe there will be... Hell, maybe they'll give it the abductability and grab guys in and spawn Locusts and it'll shoot at them. Makes no sense as a unit, but maybe they'll do that. You never know. Let's see. Starting to grab some questions. And of course, to ask a question, begin it with Dear Day 9. It's very easy. Yes. Let's see here. Classic KX. Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say. Because everything is in the state of flux, we don't know how these Swarm Hosts are going to function in a final sense, what the damage output will be. But the design is pretty close to done, I'd imagine. I don't think that the Swarm Host will suddenly become a melee attacking unit and be tearing down the front lines. I think it's pretty much set. So no matter what the statistics are, the same logic still holds, that we can use this to defend positions. We can draw Swarm Host lines and take expansions behind. Even if they do something like make them weaker, then suddenly we'll just say things like, huh, maybe we can just take more Swarm Hosts. Instead of 8, we'll do 15. So let's go ahead and hop over here. Gilgamore asked Day 9, what could Terran have done to win this? I think the biggest thing is the initial push that we saw Urk do is, I think, the sort of classic overeager Terran maneuver, which is where if we come to the everyman camp, if you are going... Oh yeah, you're not looking at the game. Let me switch the monitor. Bang. This push, the reason you go for early 1-1 upgrades is so that you have a 2-2 timing push. This happens before 2-2. It's a very classic thing to do. I'm a little overeager. I'm going to push now. Wait till you're at 160 to 180. More importantly, when your 2-2's done. Because when this happens, Zerg will almost always have an appropriate composition. This hurt Urk a lot. There was another moment. I mean, this is neat, but Urk does a good job of defending it. These drops were fantastic, and I think that Urk could have done maybe slightly more drops and slightly smaller ones instead of 2 medevac drops, maybe doing 1 medevac drops. And pushes like this, I mean, for instance, this could have happened, this exact push could have happened with the extra tanks, with the extra Marines, without the loss that happened here because it's a 2-2 timing push. That would have really been quite optimal. So this was great. I love this. Killed this off. I loved that. While taking this expansion, loved that. Kick ass. So good. A little moments of over-eagerness, like trying to step forward with these tanks, trying to do the drop at the same time. If you're pushing a location, you can't drop that location because you're essentially, you're already forcing all his units to be here with your push, and then you're putting a small number of units in an area where his units already are. That's a recipe for disaster. A drop like this, putting a drop where his units aren't, that's going to be strong. So a lot of these little tactical things, the biggest thing being the 2-2 push that flubbed. And again, notice that we lost an attack, and then another shove happens at 3-3 that I like. But just coordinating it with upgrades is basically it. Doing a good job killing off Das Expansions. I also think that this rush up was a little bit, I guess I'd say it's incorrect, but people are in beta, so they don't really know. I was even playing a game against Sheth, and I ran up on top of his Swarm Host, like, I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. And then all my stuff died fast, and I was like, oh, Swarm Hosts are good. Oh, man. Let's take 2 more questions. Let's see. Carnabas says, Day 9, I'm excited about the Swarm Host and its role as a mid-game unit. But once late-game transition occurs, don't Broodlords fill the role much better? I don't think so. I think that I actually like what the Swarm Host does quite a bit, and a lot of it has to do with resources. First of all, note that the Corruptor is 100 resources, and then you have to spend an extra buttload of gas to get the Broodlord up. So you're spending over 2 Swarm Hosts worth of gas for 1 Broodlord. Also, the Swarm Host does this. Also, the Swarm Host is burrowed, so there's that whole detection thing that you have to deal with. And you can do cute things like, if he's going Raven, have ways to shoot it down, but it'll probably have enough scan at the late game. But also with a Broodlord, the Broodlings are not nearly as powerful as the Locusts, and you have to shoot at something to create the Broodlings. Locusts from Swarm Host just make themselves and go up and kill shit. So I think that the Swarm Host is going to provide, it's almost like a super Spine Crawler. Spine Crawler is there to defend against early pushes with tiny amounts of units and against drops with tiny amounts of units, but the Swarm Host is like the mid and late game Spine Crawler, where you can go push here with your Broodlord Infestor and just leave Swarm Host here to defend. Or you can put the Swarm Host here, launch the Locust out to allow you to move your Broodlords in. So I definitely think that the Broodlords are so expensive that it's hard for them to do the same thing that the Swarm Host does. I actually don't know how much supply a Swarm Host takes. How much supply is it? Oh, it's 3. I thought it was 2. Cool. Still slightly less than a Broodlord. A Broodlord is foe. But, those are my thoughts. I'm yawning because this daily was so boring. Let's see. Try science. Day 9. What if the Terran goes any kind of air unit? I've been seeing this quite a bit. I'm going to break it into 2 categories. One, if he's going Marine Marauder Medevac Tank, like we saw Urk do in this game. And the second category is going to be in the meching circumstance. In the Marine Marauder Medevac circumstance, I'm just not worried about him going air. It's too damn hard to start getting up a lot of air units. Maybe now that they've made the Raven better, Terrans are going to start getting double Starport with double Tech Lab and start getting, you know, maybe throw out 2 Banshees and then go back to production. But given how difficult it is to get those air units up, because we're already spending all our air resources on medevacs, and going for a Marine tank, you got to build just a lot of stuff. Marine tank as a maxed army is not as good as a mech maxed army by a long shot. The damage output of a maxed mech army is huge. The damage output comparatively of a Marine tank army, the ability to deal damage, is less. So in other words, you have to be dumping a lot more resources into your Marine tank medevac army and doing a lot more engagements for it to be a good, profitable composition. So for that, I just don't think that they'll be able to get out like 6 Banshees, and 6 Banshees, and you already will have your infestors out. And if he tries to early go for the Banshees and push when you don't really have the Swarm Hosts out, his army is going to be a lot tinier and a lot easier to deal with. And we actually, Chef just got those infestors up early. Yeah, it's hard. It's just hard not to have an answer in that particular circumstance, and also have the Terran player not really have any units. Mech, on the other hand, it's a lot easier to incorporate the Banshees in there. It's very easy to get 6, 7, 8 Banshees and keep it as part of your composition with Mech and then sort of float it forward. And that does become a kind of interesting issue. But I would direct you back to that earlier game we saw with Root Slush, where we saw that he has a lot of Hydralisks with his Swarm Host composition. And he's able to just shove hard. Really easily deals with all that stuff. And I think that probably we're going to see less of the Broodlord tech and the Broodlord focus versus a meching army. It just doesn't seem very good, especially now that the Warhound and the Hellion are super mobile and the Raven's super good. I actually think we'll probably see more Hydralisks. Hydra, Roach, Viper, Swarm Host. I'm done with the daily. I hope you had fun. I had a great time doing this daily. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow, where what I'm going to be doing is I'll be playing on the ladder, and I'm going to be trying to force the Tempest in to all of my build orders. And what I'll be doing is also discussing the notion of how we plan out incorporation of the Tempest, so it's not just, I built a Tempest. Am I naughty or what? We'll be doing that tomorrow. See you then. Cheers.